You're strong. So why do narcissists gravitate towards you? Let's start with the thing nobody really wants to say out loud. You're embarrassed, maybe even ashamed. You look back and think, how did I miss that? How did I fall for it? And there's this quiet voice in your head that says you must have been naive, too trusting, too easy to read, like you somehow handed over the keys. But here's what most people don't realize. That story you're telling yourself, it's backwards. Clinicians who actually study narcissistic dynamics, people like Ramani Durvasula, say narcissists don't usually go hunting for broken, obviously vulnerable people. They look for spark. They look for empathy, for capability, for someone who's solid. If they chose you, it wasn't because you were weak. It was because you had something bright. Underneath the charm and confidence, narcissistic personalities often have a shaky internal core. Psychologists describe it as a vulnerable self-concept wrapped in grandiosity. On the outside, magnetic, certain, impressive. On the inside, unstable, dependent on validation. That validation is often called narcissistic supply. And the best supply doesn't come from someone already defeated. It comes from someone admired, someone competent, someone who shines a little. From inside that mindset, there's no thrill in overpowering someone who's already down. The rush comes from influence, from watching someone strong soften, from seeing someone impressive choose you over everyone else. If someone like you wants me, I must be extraordinary. That's the unconscious math. It's why so many survivors are the reliable ones, the capable ones, the emotionally intelligent friend everyone else leans on, the parent who shows up, the high achiever, the steady one. Narcissistic personalities can be incredibly perceptive, not in a warm, mutual way, but in a strategic way. They notice empathy. They clock resilience. And here's the twist. Resilience is attractive because it means you can take more. If you're someone who gives 100% even when you're getting crumbs back, that endurance becomes usable. At first, it doesn't feel like imbalance. It feels electric, intense, fast, like you've met your match. Like finally, someone gets it. But there's often more calculation happening than you realize. You were probably studied a little in the beginning. They watched how you treated people, how you responded to vulnerability, where your boundaries were. They might have shared a painful story early on, something about childhood, betrayal, trauma. Maybe it was exaggerated. Maybe it was half true. Maybe it was completely polished for effect. Why share something raw that fast? Because vulnerability activates empathy. And empathy is the doorway. When someone opens up about pain, most healthy people lean in. That's normal. That's how bonding works. But in narcissistic dynamics, that moment can function like a test. If you soothe quickly, reassure deeply, step into caretaker mode, it confirms something, you will invest. Sometimes there's mirroring too. You share a story about your past, and suddenly they've had a nearly identical experience. Same values, same humor, same wounds. It feels uncanny, like fate. Mirroring is a well-documented behavior in narcissistic courtship. Ramani Durvasula talks about how it can operate like a hook. It says, we're the same. But underneath, it can mean, I'm learning exactly how to attach you. When someone reflects your inner world back to you, your nervous system relaxes. Similarity feels safe. Bonding chemicals spike. It feels real. From your side, it feels like connection. From theirs, it can be positioning. And once attachment locks in, the shift starts. The empathy that drew them to you becomes something they lean on. You start explaining away mood swings. You tolerate inconsistencies. You tell yourself they're just stressed, wounded, misunderstood. You believe that if you love harder, stay steadier, give a little more, things will settle. That push-pull dynamic has a name: trauma bonding, warmth, then distance, affection, then coldness. It's intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful conditioning patterns we know. And here's the painful irony. You stay because you're strong. Resilient people endure. Hopeful people try again. Compassionate people look for the hurt underneath the behavior. Meanwhile, the narcissist doesn't actually face their insecurity. They regulate it externally through your admiration, your reassurance, your emotional labor. Then something subtle starts happening. The qualities that attracted them to you, your humor, your grounded confidence, your spontaneity begin to dim. Not because you changed at your core, but because you're now in a system that extracts more than it gives. You start monitoring their moods, anticipating criticism, adjusting yourself. That low-level vigilance builds up. Stress hormones rise. Playfulness shrinks. Creativity gets quieter. Over time, you don't feel like yourself. And here's the tragedy. As your light softens, their insecurity often softens too. If you're less radiant, they feel less threatened. Some psychoanalytic thinkers like Otto Kernberg have written about how narcissistic envy can drive an unconscious urge to spoil what's good in someone else. The light draws them in, but the comparison burns. Instead of growing, they level the field. So the very qualities that attracted them to you are the ones that slowly get worn down. And then you look in the mirror months or years later and think, I used to be stronger than this. But feeling depleted inside a draining dynamic doesn't redefine your strength. It just means you've been running on empty for a long time. You weren't chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were bright. And brightness, to someone who depends on borrowed light, is both irresistible and threatening. You didn't stay because you were clueless. You stayed because you believe in fixing things. You're the kind of person who thinks love is work. That if something matters, you don't just toss it out when it gets hard. You believed growth takes patience. That if you just invested a little more energy, had one more honest conversation, showed a little more understanding, eventually there'd be a breakthrough. Part of that is what behavioral psychology calls the sunk cost fallacy. The more you pour in, the harder it is to walk away. But honestly, it goes deeper than that. It's about who you are. If you see yourself as loyal, as someone who doesn't give up on people, leaving can feel like betraying your own character. Quitting doesn't match your identity. So you stay. You double down. You try again. And that's exactly where the imbalance lives. Because while you see the relationship as something to nurture, to repair, to fight for, they experience it as something to draw from. Your loyalty becomes a resource. Your giving becomes infrastructure. For you, it's a mission. For them, it's supply. A lot of survivors end up believing they were targeted because they were weak. But clinicians who've studied pathological narcissism, like psychoanalyst Otto Kernberg, have pointed out something different. Narcissistic personalities often gravitate toward people who elevate their image. Strength, competence, resilience. Those qualities are attractive because they add shine and durability. A partner who's already fragile might leave quickly. They can't withstand the swing between being adored and being criticized. But someone strong, someone resilient, they can survive that oscillation for a long time. Strength turns into endurance. Endurance turns into entrapment. And here's the thing. It's not always some villain sitting there with a checklist labeled Step 1, Love Bomb. A lot of it isn't consciously scripted, but patterns repeat. And people who've moved through enough relationships learn, even implicitly, that intensity hooks attachment and distance reasserts control. That hot and cold cycle. Warmth, then withdrawal, is one of the most powerful conditioning patterns we know. Intermittent reinforcement keeps people trying, hoping, adjusting themselves. For the narcissist, it maintains leverage. For you, it creates trauma bonding. Sometimes you don't leave. Sometimes they leave. And that discard, it's not just rejection. It's replacement. when your light doesn't regulate their ego the way it used to, or when someone new shows up offering fresh admiration. They pivot, ending "it first protects their sense of superiority. It keeps them from feeling dependent, but for you, it can feel annihilating. Your attachment system doesn't just shut off because they emotionally checked out. You might replay conversations at 2 a.m., question your memory, feel it in your body, tight chest, nausea, exhaustion. Your brain got used to unpredictability. It doesn't like finality. You stayed even when it hurt because loyalty isn't weakness. It's capacity, but capacity without reciprocity slowly becomes self-abandonment. When you're trying to fix someone while you're quietly breaking, you slip into what trauma therapists sometimes call a rescuer loop. You interpret their volatility as pain. You can soothe. You downplay your own exhaustion. You tell yourself you can handle it. Meanwhile, your reserves drain. And sometimes, this is the cruel part, they'll look at your depletion and say you're the unstable one, that you're too sensitive, too reactive. Their unprocessed shame gets projected outward, and you end up carrying it. You start wondering if you're losing your mind. They didn't just admire your personality. They absorbed it. When someone doesn't have a solid internal identity, they sometimes piece themselves together from other people. Psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut described how people with narcissistic vulnerabilities rely heavily on what he called self-objects, others who provide affirmation and cohesion. When admiration isn't enough, imitation can creep in. It's not enough to stand next to your light. They want to wear it. That's why the obsession after a discard can feel so personal. It's not just anger, it's exposure. When they lose access to you, they're left alone with the emptiness you were buffering. That emptiness can quickly turn into envy. And envy, psychologically, isn't just wanting what someone else has. It's feeling threatened by what you lack and can't generate internally. So instead of growing, they may try to level the field, tarnish your reputation, slide into your friend groups, copy your style, echo your language, join your spaces. From your side, it feels invasive and surreal. From theirs, it feels like survival. If you notice them talking like you, dressing like you, circling your professional world, your confusion makes sense. Healthy identity development requires differentiation, knowing what's mine and what's yours. In narcissistic dynamics, that line gets blurry because their internal core isn't firmly anchored. That doesn't excuse the harm, but it explains the behavior. And the exhaustion you describe, that constant bone-deep tiredness, it's not just emotional fatigue. It's chronic relational stress. When you're always scanning moods, anticipating reactions, repairing conflicts that aren't fully yours, your nervous system never fully relaxes. You're in low-grade fight or flight for months, maybe years. Of course, you feel burned out, foggy, less joyful. You became their external nervous system. You regulated what they never learned to regulate internally. So when someone asks, "What do you do just for you?" and you can't answer, that's not random. That's identity erosion. It happens quietly. You stop hiking because it became a battleground. You stop painting because criticism drained the fun out of it. You stop seeing certain friends because tension followed you everywhere. Your brain starts associating things you once loved with stress. So it steers you away. That's not weakness, that's conditioning. Maybe hiking used to be your ritual. Fresh air, solitude, feeling strong in your body. Then it became shared. Then it became hostile. A fight on a trail doesn't just ruin a Saturday. It rewires the experience. The hobby gets contaminated, and sometimes, unconsciously, undermining what made you glow reduces their sense of comparison. If you're not shining as brightly, they don't feel as overshadowed. When you say they picked you because you were better, it doesn't mean superior in every way. It often means more integrated, more self-aware, more emotionally fluent. Those qualities both attract and threaten someone with narcissistic traits. As Otto Kernberg wrote, narcissistic envy can drive an unconscious urge to spoil what's good in the other. The light draws them in, but the comparison stings. So instead of building themselves up, they try to dim you. And here's the heartbreaking part. You started doubting your strength precisely because it was being drained. Feeling fragile inside a narcissistic dynamic doesn't redefine who you are at baseline. It just means you've been overextended for too long. When you're constantly giving reassurance, logistics, emotional stability without being replenished, even the strongest person will wobble. So yes, keep shining. But maybe now you shine with boundaries. Light doesn't have to flood every room to be real. It can be steady, contained, protected. What they tried to borrow was never actually transferable. Identity built from within can't be permanently stolen. It can get obscured by exhaustion, shaken by doubt, muted by stress, but it's still yours. And when you start taking small pieces back, resting, revisiting old interests, saying no, remembering what you like, you're not just healing from a relationship. You're coming home to yourself. And that self was there the whole time, waiting for a little oxygen.